So, I have a lot of things on my mind, and I've had a lot of things on my mind. So I decided I'm going to make a video and try to unload my brain a little bit, and hopefully it's something worth putting out there in the world. I don't know. um, yeah. I don't really know where this video is going to lead to or even what I'm going to end up talking about because there's just so much. So much. So much. Um, right now, I guess I'll talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and observations. It's not quite about the Black Lives Matter movement. It's more about my observations of dealing with the pagan and Wiccan and occult and witch communities, predominantly on Facebook communities, or the communities on Facebook for the things that I just rambled off. And just what I've observed, what I've learned, interesting observations, um, and just it's very interesting. I always say that social media is just a really, really, really interesting social experiment. And me, I really, in a multitude of the forums I've been in, maybe not all of them, some of them, whatever, the forums I've been in, the forms of social media and networking that I've been in, that I always will find the witch or pagan path that is in that area. Predominantly because I'm pretty much a solitary practitioner. I I've been solitary by choice, also solitary by circumstance. And so a lot of my worship and knowledge and fellowship came from complete strangers and complete strangers on the internet and communities like that. While I do have a lot of friends who practice or have spiritual beliefs similar to mine, I'm an introvert and I don't leave my house much. I mean, the fact that I am on the internet so much shows that I'm just one of those people. And yes, I get out and do things, but I'm one of those people that's kind of antisocial. I've always been. I mean, if you could ask my parents, my sister, my friends, people who know me in real life, they know that's how I am. But I've been really active in Facebook witch communities, and about 3 years ago, this is something I haven't actually talked about on here simply because it's something I'm proud of, but I don't want to like brag about it. I almost feel like if I bring it up, if I talk about it, I'm bragging about it, and that's not what it is. But it's this aspect of my life has really taught me a lot, and being in these pagan and witch communities. And then about 3 years ago, I made one for my local community where I live. It's predominantly for my town, but also for the small surrounding towns. And this was an endeavor I had thought about for years before I actually did. And then I had some events in my life that really pushed me to make that community because I realized it was something that was needed. It just was something that was needed, and I chose to make and keep this page public. So while I still controlled who was in the community and I could still check their profiles and see where they were from and, make sure I was keeping everyone safe, I still kept it open to the world to see. While I have multiple reasons why I do that, why I kept it open, and why a lot of my cyber footprint is still open to the public and always has been. Um, but that is a different story. Right now, I'm talking about Facebook, which communities. So, um, being in these communities, I've learned a lot. One thing I realized that for a lot of people in the pagan and the Wiccan communities and the witch communities, they're solitary too. Like I said, sometimes because of choice, sometimes because of situation. And these outlets, I had seen multiple people post in the past. Now, and I haven't seen it as much lately, but in the past, I had seen a lot of posts for people saying that, these Facebook communities were kind of like the equivalent of their church because they didn't have a coven. They didn't have a place they could go to with other people to worship and fellowship and celebrate and, do ritual with and do circle with. They didn't physically have that. And they used these communities as their actual spiritual home. So going into these communities for some people is like the equivalent of going to church for a Christian. And that's part of why I made my community as well, because I wanted to give the people in my area a sense of fellowship. I don't know how much I've talked about my past Christian upbringing on here. I may have spoken of it. But for me, as being a solitary in my pagan path and my witch path, was very different for when I was Christian and I was raised in a church and was very active in that church and had a real understanding of the need and importance of a spiritual family and a safe place that you can seek guidance from. And I was very active in it. Youth group, camp, Bible school. I actually helped teach Bible school. I helped teach children's church. So I was one of the people that helped indoctrinate the children in the church. I mean, when you put it that way, it's really creepy. But I was very active in it. And going from one spiritual community that I was extremely active in, that let me be active and let me be a part of, to going to another spiritual community that there was nothing there for unless I went to a neighboring town, sometimes up to an hour away. That's just not what I was used to. Small town girl. I mean, granted, Waynesboro is granted, where I'm from is not as small as some places. It's still small. And so that's what a lot of these communities are. That's what mine was and still is. And that's part of the purpose, among other things. But you notice an interesting blend when you have these communities. You learn that a lot of people are in different places of their path, and people are in those communities for different reasons. Lots and lots of different reasons. And everyone's in the path for a different reason and in a different place in their spiritual path. Different lengths of time, have more area of study in some places than others. It can be really messy. One thing you can learn, and I learned this before the whole Black Lives Matter protest thing happened. I learned this before. This is something I learned early on, was that um, you'll find people in the community that you can share fellowship with, your spiritual belief with, core spiritual beliefs and philosophy, but you do not necessarily share personalities that are of the same type or hobbies that are of the same type, or even you might not even like them, but you can still have a brotherhood and a sisterhood with them. You also will find people who are in these communities purely for novelty's sake. Purely for novelty's sake. Like, this is just the next hot thing, and they're going to do that. There's people there who are only there to escape from reality. So the people you find in these places aren't always there for the right reasons. That's not right. I shouldn't say that. It's not that they're there for the right reasons. They're just there for different reasons. And you have to remember that. And it's really hard to remember. For me, in this particular instance that's bringing this subject up again, because this is a lesson I'm constantly having to relearn, particularly with working with other people, because now that I have this community, it progressed into physical interaction with other pagans in the community. But so I've had to learn that everyone's going to have everyone's going to be different. Even if you share a spiritual path, does not mean you're going to share a political path. It doesn't mean you're going to share a like I said, the things I said earlier. The things I said earlier, you're not going to necessarily be like this person at all. You just share the same spirituality. You find this in the Christian community all the time. So everyone's there for different reasons. I find that true just in general for social media. Everyone's there for different reasons. Hey, I told you I didn't know what this video was going to come to. So if you're like, what's this crazy lady rambling about? I warned you. I will have to say that for me, some of these communities that I've been in for a very long time, I've become extremely disappointed with them. Not all of them. Some I stick around for a while and see how the things change and see if it's just this particular situation, they're dealing with, or if it's an overall thing. And if I realize it's an overall thing, I'll eventually leave the communities. But right now, with not even right now, I'll just say just right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, but no, this moves into what people say you never want to talk religion and politics. And here's the thing, pastors talk politics all the time. I know this seems like it came really out of the blue, but I was thinking about how I wanted to word stuff, and I realized that it really has to take a turn into the situation that the spiritual community really avoids politics. And here it is, like, our entire world is going through all kinds of shit on various levels. And basically, in these witch and pagan communities, I wasn't seeing anybody address it. They were avoiding it, pussyfooting around it, and pretending it wasn't there, and not addressing it. And, but just pretending it wasn't there. And I was fucking appalled. And I was fucking appalled because any church, any good spiritual person will look at their congregation and do what they can to make them feel better about that situation. You know, that's what they do. I've been to churches when shit is going down. The pastors, the people who are leading the groups, will do their best to confront the situation, acknowledge the situation, and help those people through it. And not scream that we don't want to hear about politics here. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. So I think right now, I didn't expect this part coming up. Okay, so I think right now, and this is something I have been thinking about, people need to reevaluate why they are on the path they are on. Like, really, really sit down, and this applies to anybody, about any religion. Sit down and think about what you actually believe. And if you're a pagan or a Wiccan, I want you to sit down and ask yourself, why am I on this path? Because you know what? Paganism and being a witch, I hate to say a horrible thing about Christians right now, but we are not about just the numbers. We're not about how many souls we can save. That's not what we're all about. We're not all about the highest number wins. The highest number is right. No, that's not what we're about. We're about what's in here. And about figuring yourself out and figuring out your relationship with the rest of the world. We are a nature-based religion. Most pagan religions have a great extent of them steeped into nature. So why are you on this path? Why are you a practicing witch? Why am I a practicing witch? Yeah, maybe when I was like 15 and a kid, being raised in a certain environment made it very interesting and appealing. Just as anybody does. And curiosity is natural and normal. And there's nothing wrong with figuring that stuff out. And that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. But what people are doing by not wanting to talk politics and the hard issues in their spiritual communities shows me that you don't actually understand a spiritual community. And while I know that in certain cultures and certain spiritual practices, there are people who their whole job is to just be that calm person. That's fine. If that's who you need to be, then be that calm person. But guess what? Those calm people, they're not avoiding the situations either. They're just figuring out how to express it in a calm way. This brings us back to everybody's at a different point in their path. And everybody's on this path for a different reason. Why are you on it? Why are you on it? Do you know? Do you know why you're on this path? I'm on this path right now because it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. It answers the questions in my soul that I need to know the answers to. It answers the questions in my head that I need to know the answers to. It answers the questions in the physical world that I need to know the answers to. In the forms of science, in the forms of philosophy, in the forms of psychology, in the forms of spirituality, because in my world, they're all the same. I've made a video a long time ago that for me, at this point in my life, the magical and the mundane, those lines are very blurred. I see the magical in the mundane because the mundane is magical and there is no difference. Does that make me a crazy person? By some people, yeah. But it's a matter of what's my normal, what I'm used to, what's my baseline, and how well I interact with the rest of the world with that baseline. I know that when I was on a different path, I could not sleep at night. I would stay up at night as a child, a very young child, talking the age of my kids, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and up. And I would just think my brain was very active. I was one of those people that would stay up all night long and think and figure out what was going through my head, trying to figure out the answers to all these questions that I had, you know, and mine happened to be in a spiritual setting. That's how they always have been, ever since a kid, you know, like I regularly had that question of like, well, God created everything. Who created God? And it's really strange because, you know, people have answers for that, whatever. But I couldn't get the answers that I needed to give me fulfillment from that path. That's why I'm on the one I'm on. Ultimately, the only life you can lead is your own. You can't control anybody else's life but your very own life. People want to talk about the rule of 3 and all of that. The rule of 3, it's what you can live with. It's what your conscience can handle and how that affects your day-to-day life. I mean, you can put all kinds of spiritual concepts to it and push it in all kinds of different ways. But when it comes down to the mundane, and this is where the mundane and the magical combine, it comes down to what your conscience can handle. I've met people who have the practice, and this isn't necessarily a pagan or witch thing. I've met people who they live their life of if no one saw it, it didn't happen. I'm just going to say that statement is really fucking terrifying to me and wrong. Before there was photography, before there was, you know, paintings, the oldest one of I mean one of the oldest forms of recording is just through storytelling and remembering it and retelling the events over and over orally. And to have someone who lives their life in such a manner that they have the philosophy that, well, if no one saw it, it didn't happen. Like, that doesn't set right. That makes, not my place to say what that makes someone, but in my eyes, that makes me really question that type of person. that whole ramble about that is a totally separate thing. Yeah, just been heavy thinking. I am a heavy thinker. I always have been. Yeah. Yeah. I'm a heavy thinker. I used to, before the internet, before I regularly used the internet as an outlet for what's going on in here and in here, I was a journaler. Yeah, I'm one of those people who have boxes and boxes of journals. I have like 2 boxes, like, you know, the boxes that paper come in, those big boxes. I've got 2 of them full of journals. Dating the whole way back to when I was about 8 or 9. Yeah. But right now, I feel like the stuff that I need to say right now, like this whole video, the stuff I need to say, I feel like it just needs to be out there in the world for other people to think about. This shouldn't be I shouldn't be the only person with some of these thoughts rolling around in my head. And I mean, as a disclaimer, even in those moments where I seem kind of aggressive in this video or kind of pompous or kind of assholey or whatever, those are just mine. Those are my take on the situation. I cannot speak for everybody else. it's just my observation. I can't speak for anybody other than myself, and I'm not going to. Even if I use the wrong wording that makes it sound like I'm speaking for somebody else, I'm not. I'm really just speaking for myself. Okay, so I think that's gonna be all. I have kids coming up here. Hi. Bye.
Then you have to work.